Thank you for being with us. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us. And the purpose of our meeting today is to get further input on the process we're going through to seek a new permanent county manager position. As I'm sure everyone knows, we've retained a search firm out of Norcross, Georgia to help us with the process. And we've had a series of community meetings, but it's also really important to hear from folks who work here in Buncombe County every day. So that's why we're here today.
Closer? You seem really far away.
The layout is a little awkward, but we're going to just make it work. So thank you all for being with us, and we really just are looking for ideas and input on what are the qualities that people think are important to have in a manager. What's your vision for how that office should work? So that's what we want to hear directly from folks about today. So do any other commissioners have any other comments you'd like to share before we ask folks to?
Do we have a scribe?
The meeting is being recorded, I believe, and Mr. Wooden. So it is being recorded. And is this also going to be made publicly available, or is this just being recorded for our own internal?
I think they're all going to be made publicly available, but also this will be sent to the consultant. Okay. So we definitely want people to use the podium because that's where the cameras are focused.
And I want to say, we know what the last decade was like, if not longer. Of reprisal and acrimony and people speaking up. So even now, I don't know if any of you feel that, but I would hope that we can say it should feel that way. And I know when you've been in a toxic environment, it takes a long time to shed that. I know personally some stories that have happened. So I hope you can share with us today, because we're on the front lines of what we need, without that fear that someone's going to be annoyed or you're going to get in trouble, for lack of a better word, going to my 16-year-old granddaughter's terminology.
One other thing I would share too is that a lot of the characteristics we would want in a county manager are probably pretty evident in terms of experience, management, in local government, the competencies that go with that job, but aside from some of the more extraordinary circumstances that we've been in, since Wanda Green retired, I would also just say that aside from any of those issues, she was the county manager here for a long time, and anytime any local government would be going through a transition where someone has been in that role for such a long time, it's an opportunity to kind of rethink how things should work. Because it's sort of, here's one model, there's one person who did this for a long time. And I think we can all get kind of accustomed to just thinking, these are the way things are done. But, the reality is there's a lot of different managers have different approaches to this kind of job in terms of how much time they think about dedicating to the internal management versus spending time in the community engagement, working with all the different partners the county has. So, I don't think there's just one way to do this. I think there's a lot of different approaches to it. I'm confident we are going to get a really large and talented pool of applicants, which is I'm sure that's a good problem to have. So as we think about the choices between probably a lot of very experienced people, it's helpful to think about what folks really see as maybe tipping it in one direction or another. So any other comments folks have before we open it up? Mr. Wood, any other thoughts you would share?
No, I think you handled it very well. There are a lot of different approaches to it, a lot of different management styles, so it really comes down to what y'all are looking for.
I think all of us, I think all of us have noticed that. We've gone through 2, now we're at 3, and I think we've got a better idea of what happens in the county now, I do believe. So,
all right.
That's up to y'all. We're going to listen.
And so we didn't really intend to make this too overly formal, but we do want to ask folks to speak from the podium so we can record it well and make sure the notes, and all the comments do get passed on to our consultant who's not with us today. So and we'd really love to hear from everyone, even if it's just a brief comment. So somebody want to kick us off? Sure, great.
Yeah, I want to echo what Chairman said. I'd really like to hear from everybody sitting there, even if it's 10 seconds, even if it's small, even if you're repeating something someone else has said. I think it's important that we hear from each other.
I'm Kathy Brady. I'm the Director of IT. This is very off the cuff. I have not prepared anything to say here. But to what Ellen said, I think there definitely is still a feeling of fear in the organization. There is definitely a disconnect between this building and the rest of the organization. This is a very insular type of place. We appreciated George coming out and meeting with all of us in our own locations, but he's busy. Haven't seen him since then. We don't see you guys. There used to be a barrier between us and you, but we don't see much of you either. So my thoughts about the county manager works for you, right? And you work for the taxpayers, we work for the taxpayers. And Asheville's a really cool place to be. My concern about getting in somebody here is, I feel like we're at a place where we need to get back to basics. We need to focus on the organization, the basics of the organization. The majority of the money that Keith and Jennifer bring into the organization go to fund those basic core services that these department directors are providing. I don't feel like there's enough focus on those core services. You guys have your agendas. We're just trying to get the work done. So how are you going to bring in a county manager who works for you and is trying to meet your agendas? And again, Asheville's a great place to be. You're going to get a lot of interesting people who are going to be looking outwards, not so much inwards. How do you balance that between those core services the taxpayers are paying for and what you guys want out of a county manager? We work for the county manager. That county manager works for you. I'd just like you to kind of speak to that concept a little bit.
Thank you. Mr. Behan.
Well, as all of you know, I'm the old man of the organization. But anyway, I'd like to say first that I've been here through every county manager we've had was here before we had a county manager. The chair acted as county manager, and that'd be a good job for you, Brian. I'll go back to that for a while. But anyway, I'm a firm believer in the chain of command. Everything goes from the departments up through the county manager up to the commissioners. It's primarily so everybody knows what's what, and everybody's in the loop. I'd like to see somebody who believes in that system and who is not a micromanager. The worst thing I think we could have would be a micromanager. And I'd like to compliment George because he's certainly not that. He lets us do our job and supports us the same way the commissioners support us. One question I would have, once you hire a manager, how long is it going to take that manager to really get his feet on the ground? And is it going to be somebody who's familiar with county government? Is it going to be somebody who maybe is familiar with municipal government but not county government? And there's a difference there, and certainly some of you on the board can know what I'm talking about. But going back again, like I said, when you picked an interim manager, I think you picked somebody who understands county government very well, having been involved in it as long as he did, and it made the process a lot easier. But we're all concerned that we have somebody we can relate to, somebody who will keep us ahead of the curve, technologically speaking, follow through on the programs that the board wants to institute, somebody who's going to relate what you want to us and what we want back to you, or what we'd like to see. But anyway, that'd be my comments. And just look out the county as a whole, not just somebody to fill a slot. Look for somebody we can all work with, somebody who'll be a good manager, who can certainly relate to the public. And I think that's very critical at this point, that we have somebody who can relate to the people in different parts of the county and the municipalities.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Kurt Euler, Senior Attorney 2 in Employee Benefits Risk Management. I don't really have, I just have some traits that I hope that you all might consider in our next manager. I think for the last, forever, we've had a lot of in-groups and out-groups. You know, you're either on the in-group, everything's fine and dandy, but if you're on the out-group, look out. And I really hope that one of the things that we're looking for in a manager, someone that is focused on team building. There are a lot of really good people, and that we as a group, as managers, we don't all relate together. We're not all on the same page. And I really think that for us to really be effective and maximize is that we have someone that is team focused and that treats people with respect and doesn't necessarily have favorites. I think that would be a big thing. I also want someone. I also would think that we would want someone that's balanced and is able to hold managers accountable. I don't think we've had anybody here who's actually like with goal setting and trying to help us like achieve things. We've never had that. So those would be some things I would be looking for. Is someone that is fair and balanced, but holds people accountable. We really haven't had that, and that's something I think would help us as managers moving forward. So, thanks.
Thank you, Kurt.
George, we'll be able to go back and have somebody scribe all this out for us.
Or
Yes.
recording,
Yeah, we're
right?
recording it.
Yeah, I know they're recording it, but
Got a scribe.
we'll have somebody. We do? I want to thank Kurt for mentioning some of the things, and I want to challenge some of the others to talk about soft skills that you would want from a manager, as far as cultural and, team building and things like that, and, be specific in that, because that's very, very helpful for us, because we're going to relay this to the finalists. We're going to take these suggestions that you're bringing to us, kind of take them into a smaller version, and then relay these to our finalists.
And I just have a question. Kathy, you touched on it, but so the barriers to commissioners and having conversation, was that for you was told not to speak to commissioners? Nobody has to answer specifically, but did that just go on for a really long time?
Part of it is to find you guys, you are in this building, and I think people never felt comfortable reaching out to you in any other way. I mean, maybe some did, but I think the majority of us would say that just wasn't part of our culture. Culture is a really hard thing to define, and then that just was part of the culture. And even when it was made very clear that you guys felt like that barrier was removed, I know, I'm not in this building. For me to get off the third floor elevator and turn to the left, it's kind of something that would give me trepidation to think that I'm going to be seen, and people, why were you over there? And it may be different for the people who are in this building all the time, who are up and down the stairs and are used to being seen. But for those of us who aren't, it's like we're making a statement that we're coming to talk to you. And I think that is something that we would be questioned on, probably by some people still here now.
So, and that culture it was like for a decade, a long time?
Oh, yeah.
That's one culture that I can't accept, because a long time ago, I got in trouble for talking to the help. And, I'll take my licks, but I've always wanted, the help is what Buncombe County is, whether it's IT or, it don't matter, whether it's Cook Purdy's attorney or Frew or planning or maintenance or whatever, or the landfill. You make up what we are. And if you want to talk to us, I'll be more than happy. This person will always be more than happy to come and talk. It's just a little different building. You gotta press a button and they let you into the lobby, and that's about as far as you get, because I've been over there before. But you got a good group of people, and and you got a lot of work to do, because when I look at my thing and you're researching my emails and stuff to make sure somebody's not sending me something that's bad, there's nobody that appreciates that any more than I do. Because first things, I don't like reading half of it to start with, but when you find something that's bad, I appreciate it.
I think part of it is on our side, and so those of us who are more mature and have been here a long time, like me, I feel like I have to maybe model that for other people and show them that it's okay to do that. whether I'm calling you and asking you to come over there or whatever. So it, you know, we had the Wanda situation, and we've had the past 13-month or year under Mandy, which was a whole different kind of transition. We're just now coming out from under that. So it's definitely a process, and in the 6 months we have left with George, I mean, George described himself as a meat and potatoes guy, and we all think that's great. We do recognize, coming from a small government, that he really, I mean, he says words that I would not expect a county manager to understand from the IT world, but because he's so close to it. So that's why my question about who you're bringing in, somebody who's going to be way up here versus somebody like a George who gets it, what we're doing way down here, and where that connection's going to be between the two sets of people who are, you know, we're all doing county work. It's just how do we create that connection without this huge divide between us? So it's a process.
You know, I mean, the whole, this, I don't think this is really the exact question we were asking for about the characteristics for the manager, but it is definitely related. You know, I think the issue of how commissioners and county staff communicate, and how we work with the manager, how you work with the manager. I mean, these are all really important questions. I mean, I would just you could probably have a whole separate meeting just around those issues, but and maybe we should as we get further into this. But I mean, I would say I would certainly never want county staff to feel like you couldn't communicate with elected officials, especially if there's a concern, you know, things that that you would want to feel a need to share. You know, at the same time though, it's you know, the relationship between the commission and the manager, the other staff who directly report to us. I mean, I think there is like there is a certain amount of respect we have to have for those structures and relationships, though, because the way it can play out negatively is when you have politicians trying to give direction, you know, to county staff that may just be their personal opinions, but are not, you know, not official actions of this body, and maybe going around the manager in ways that are not healthy. You know, so I think, you know, these are all important questions, and I think we should continue to think them all through, make sure we try to get that right balance between communication, but respect for the different structures that we need to have in place. So let's keep going. Who wants to go next?
You need to come to the Ingalls and Candler, because people there don't have a bit of problem talking to me. So I don't know if it's something to do with Ingalls or anything, but if y'all come there, you'll really open up to your commission.
It's totally open process there.
Or Angles and Black Mountain, you know, yeah.
Okay.
Can y'all tell us a little bit more about what you expect the process to look like moving forward from here, where you're at now, and
Come
where
up,
you'd like to
can
go?
you come up so we can record it, please?
I'm not giving you any feedback. I'm just more curious for information as to where you're at in the process and what it looks like moving forward. How will you choose?
Let's let some more speak and then go there.
Okay.
We will. Good question. We'll do that.
Okay.
Drew.
Anybody else?
Somebody else want to give some comments? We'll talk more about the process before we're done.
Yeah, we need.
Do you have want to get? Come on.
Come on. Love to hear from everybody.
Thank you for showing the respect for us to be able to listen to what our concerns are and what we think will bring a good manager forth. We really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. You know, I think everything that I hear and what I've even started to hear here today is that it's more about culture, okay? All the things we deal with every day and have dealt with for 10 years is about the culture that we developed within this organization. And I think for a new manager coming in, really needs to understand what that culture has been in order to repair it. You got to know where the problems were at. But more importantly, what are we going to do moving forward? And I think that person, I think as Jerry said, really has to understand that we want that person to fit in to this group, this management. We want that person to be a part of this. And I've said for a long time, you know, we really need someone to pull us together closer as a team. And you need a manager who really wants to be a part of that team, not out here and we're over here. And you're hearing a lot of things about, you know, us and them. And that has went on, you know, for a long time and probably still does to a certain extent. But I think a good manager needs to understand that and needs to understand and have that trait about them to be able to pull a team together and really empower this team to do the job we need to do every day. and serve the citizens the way we should serve the citizens every day. I tell my staff sometimes, I said, I think I should write up on the wall, what it is, why we're here. Okay. Sometimes I think we forget why we're here. And if you've ever heard, the old saying is that you got to figure out your why. Okay. I think we lost our why somewhere along the way, about what's really important to us, not only as employees, but as citizens. So, I think it comes down to those couple of things that I'll give to you. And that is culture. There's a lot of different management styles, different philosophies. How is that going to fit into this organization? And then someone who truly can build a team and pull this team together and make everybody feel like they're a part of it, and everybody's comments are worth something within the organization.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question.
Yes.
So in these town meetings we've had, there have been, the one that Mike and I did, there were some people that wanted someone to have county manager experience, and then there are others that wanted someone not to have that. Do you all have a feeling for that?
I think we can go back to George. I think probably most of us in the room would say, why in the world does George want to retire? Good job, George. But, I think there's a lot of things that an experienced person brings to the table. Automatic. When I talked to George, he and I sat and talked for about an hour when he came and met with me. And probably one of the only people that I've ever sat and talked to at that level that truly understood tax. Okay? Same as Kathy said. He truly understands IT. He knows all the components of that and how it all comes together and how it all works. And I do think that's important, that someone can bring some of that to the table. But on the other side of it, what I would be cautious of is that you're also bringing somebody in from another culture who's probably going to bring that with them, rather than not ever being in that business and really truly developing their own culture with us. That new, fresh person who can develop a culture with us as this team. So, thank you.
Next.
Come on.
I can pitch something.
There we go. There we go. Here we go. Just got two at once. That's what I like.
To the head.
Line up. You're going?
Michael, go, and then you're on deck.
You next.
Hey, everybody. So here's some common things. Jerry's talking about, we need order, we need chain of command. Kurt and Kathy both talk about issues where there's the in and the out people. There's the core services. And I think part of the culture problem is that everyone needs to get back to a point where we know that the rules apply to everybody. And that just hasn't been the case, at least for 4 or 5 years. And we all know that, and George is good at it, but I think that comfort would come for everybody if we just had that understanding.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Rob Morrill, and I'm the business officer for Health and Human Services. Stoney is on vacation this week, so sent me in his stead. I would like to echo everything that I've heard so far, and as I know, you'll be looking for someone with high ethics and managerial experience, and the basic qualities that you would look for in a good manager. I just want to make sure that we are looking for someone who has a spirit of service. With the trust and the community being as betrayed, we have social workers and environmental health specialists and people going out into the field who are bearing the brunt of the distrust. I mean, they were already in tense situations before. And so if we don't have anyone that can approach that from a spirit of service and repair that bond with the community, I think that we'll be at a loss. So I just want to be wary that the pendulum doesn't swing so far over that we are looking at a balance between the dollars and cents and someone who can really have a spirit of service. So, thank you.
And I think, going back where you just said there, they're taking the brunt out there, we're taking the brunt here, and we deserve it. We're the elected officials. And, I'm embarrassed with what's happened, but, they step down on us, that's fine. And that's, I'm 100% there, and we deserve a lot of it. but we try, you know, and y'all are trying, and we keep trying, so, but I thank you for that.
Rob, thank you for sharing that. And if anyone else has insights or perspective to share about what folks on y'all's teams are kind of experiencing right now, or how people are talking or thinking about what a new county manager might bring, it would be, in addition to your own perspective, from a leadership perspective, it would be really helpful to hear anything else you can share on that front.
We are prepared to sit here in awkward silence until everyone says something. So just be prepared. We will wait all of you out.
Because we have a lot of people with time waiting for us, so we're happy to sit with all of you.
Try.
So Rachel Nygaard, Strategic Partnerships, to sort of echo, to pick up on where Rob left off and answer your question, Jasmine. Teams and strategic partnerships, our work is very much community facing and working with community. And I think that we worry sometimes that the back to basics, which is so important, might get in the way of collaboration and the community focus. So those internal pieces, having fairness and knowing what to expect and having teamwork and respect and not in and out is critical. I heard from a team that's based in the courthouse that they feel like access to resources is based on kind of what building you're in, who you're seen by. So those are critical, but having a person, while the tone is set by the elected officials, having a manager that can be strategic and visionary while also being technical and accountable and sees the sort of creative spirit. I think a lot about the nonprofit community in Buncombe County. We have such a robust network of community organizations. Some of them are really well-formed and institutional, big agencies, and some of them are grassroots or faith groups. So those public-private partnerships, we've done a really good job as Buncombe County, not trying to go it alone as county government, but really working with those community groups, and would worry that a time of austerity could get in the way of that progress that we make when we work together.
Thanks, Rachel.
I'm Gigi Francis, and I'm the library director. Everything that everybody has said is true, but what I can offer you is what my staff sees on a regular basis. They see everybody from the richest people in Biltmore Forest to the people who are in the housing projects. All of them appreciate all the services that Buncombe County allows us to provide for them. What the staff is looking for, though, is a feeling that there is somebody at the helm that we can trust, that will listen to everybody's experience, not just the in crowd, not create an out crowd, but just have someone who will listen to the community, if not to the staff, so that makes our job easier, but we are able to better reflect what the community needs.
Thanks, Gigi.
Appreciate y'all's time today, hearing us out. Appreciate all the feedback. I think everyone's been pretty open and honest thus far. So I'll talk about three things. The first one I'm going to talk about is my analogy. It's going to be the book. And so some of y'all that talk to me, you know that I talk about things and analogies and metaphors. But so I think what we've seen, and people have said this, is, there's a book for local government management. And I mean that in kind of a literal sense. And there's a way that you do things. There's a process. It's mandated. It's in statute. If you've gotten a master's in public administration, you were probably forced through it. I can relate to that. So I think that's an important thing when we're talking about experience, because I think it's very easy for us to say, we're a unique community, or we need someone that can adapt, but really we need somebody that can manage the foundation. The budget process has dates, and you have to adhere to those dates, just as an example.
financial statements, bond issuances. All of these things are very technical, and I'm not saying that that can be your only focus, but we need a manager that knows the book, didn't write their own book, isn't just learning about the book.
Right.
We need someone who has been there, done that, in my opinion. Anyone can disagree. Second point would be about the process. Again, I'm giving you analogies here, but so the process has to be consistent. It doesn't matter who asks. It's a wealthy person in a neighborhood or an impoverished person in another neighborhood. Process has to be the same all the time. And I would argue that it should be the same as for staff as it is for commissioners. When a request is made, we need to know, everyone needs to be confident that the process will be adhered to. We're not going to take shortcuts. We're going to do it because that's our job, to execute a process consistently so it's fair, equitable, all of those things. The process. The third thing I'll talk about is the building. I apologize for the analogies, but you've heard it today. So culture is clearly a thing. And as important as it is, Commissioner Frost, I think for us to feel like we can talk to y'all, I sort of would argue that's not as important as us talking to us. If there's issues, we need to be able to address them. And I think a lot of people can do that. I talk to Jennifer and Keith pretty frequently, as an example. But we need to be able to call each other and know that it's not an in-crowd, out-crowd thing. If you call me, I'm not going to pick up the phone and call Jim or somebody and get somebody to yell at you. We need to be able to resolve our own issues without commissioner input. No offense, Commissioner Fryer. But I'm being honest, and there are going to be times when that's not possible, and we will have to escalate. But our general position shouldn't be to escalate to a manager, escalate to our boss, escalate to the board. That's my personal opinion. So those are my three things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dustin Clark. I'm here on behalf of Eric Hardy, who's also on vacation this week. I do have some feedback from finance staff. They really want a county manager who is intimately familiar with procurement law as it relates to North Carolina general statute. So just wanted to, I was told to say that, not a joke. But the other thing that I would be looking for in a county manager would be someone who understands that the data about the county is owned, the data owners are the taxpayers of Buncombe County, and you should really have an emphasis and a desire to get more information out to the public and to the commissioners. It's not about crafting a message or hiding behind loopholes in public records laws, but really getting that information out, making it easy and accessible. So that's what I've got.
Thank you.
That's good stuff.
There will be a question on the interviews about experience with procurement purchasing policy as per state law because of that comment. So, great job.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I guess I'd just say a few things. Hard to follow up on Tim's, but I just say we work to continue to diminish any animosity between us and the municipalities, recognizing that we don't want to re-enter into any kind of departmental silos. Continue the dialogue with the municipalities, but understand that there is a difference between rural and urban faces in our county. And also there's a difference between rural and urban services. And we also need someone that can manage the expectations of our citizens. And sometimes just be a rumor quasher. A 600-acre landfill that the county's going to purchase.
Yeah, that's not true.
That was the one this weekend.
Ordered that.
We need someone that can understand the different dynamics associated with a gateway community. We definitely understand our uniqueness here. Honor the subject matter experts. They will make you whole. And I just think since we're doing analogies that the county's kind of a multiple stage rocket. If any one stage fails, we could all fail. So that's what I would offer.
Good afternoon. Clint, 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 I think it's pretty straightforward how you maybe quantify and evaluate in an interview process the specific traits. I think Dustin talked about purchasing policies. Um, how do you quantify and evaluate trust or a person's ability to trust a team? You know, here is the team. The actions of a few shouldn't define the ability of the overall group, and it needs to be somebody that can trust us. And George has done a great job at that. He came down the first management team meeting we had. We passed around a sign up for for George to come and visit. And like an idiot, I signed up first and didn't think about the repercussions that it was a Friday and my meeting with George was on Monday. So I came up with a list. He came down and sat with me. He came to, my department. He didn't ask me to come to him. And I talked for a solid hour. And I literally thought his pen was going to explode. And he took the time to sit and listen to me. And he gained that trust in me. So again, how do you evaluate and how do you quantify somebody's ability to trust? Because George did it, and I think it is possible, and hopefully the consultant that has been selected is thinking about those type questions. It's not specific questions, again, about specific knowledge of purchasing procedures, but again, a broken record talking about Jerry and not wanting to see a micromanager and team building. What questions do you ask to an individual to be able to evaluate their ability to be a part of a team, to lead a team, and to get the input from the subject matter experts. I think we possess that knowledge. Again, I think the actions of a few shouldn't be passed down to the entire group. It's a good group of people that we have that work at Buncombe County government. I'd like to see it stay that way.
Thank you.
George, does Slayton give us opportunity when we get down to the finalists to do 360, the type of, where you really drill into people's personalities and such by asking, I've been in the middle of one and they sent one to my wife, which was pretty revealing, but anyhow. But, when we, some of the points on team building, some of the points on soft skills, I believe we're going to get a stellar group of candidates when it comes to the book, and I really believe we're going to see that. And then to meet these other team building and soft skills, and how do they treat the people in their neighborhood? How do they, and there's ways to assess that.
Right. And I think they'll give you some good ideas on that. And whether you want to have a second set of interviews with your finalists, they can do that. They can set up assessment centers if you want to do that. So really, when you sit down to talk about the manager profile, which is part of what this is, and you give them all that input, part of that will be discussing and getting his input on what he thinks would be the right approach as far as the interviews and that sort of thing. But I agree, there are questions you can ask that get to some of those things. One thing I did want to put y'all's mind at ease about, a couple of things actually. The first one is an experienced manager should be able to come in and analyze the culture of an organization fairly quickly. And I think they can make adjustments accordingly. And the other advantage this one will have is, of course, with the board, they'll give them some background, but I'll also be spending about 2 or 3 days in a transition period with them, and I fully intend to go over with them what I think, give them my perceptions of where I think we are, and certainly culture is one of those. But I do think we're we're starting to turn the corner. It's just a slow process. This is an aircraft carrier. It's not a speedboat. You know, it takes a while to turn this thing. And so, but it's going to take a while to earn that trust. And a new manager fully understands, the good ones fully understand, they've got to earn your trust, just as you've got to earn theirs. So they're going to come in, I think, with an open mind with things. If they don't have that, they won't be successful in this business very long. So I want to put your minds at ease about that. But I do think with Mr. Slavin, when he gets here, we'll be going through the manager profile, and at that point, he'll be able to give us some guidance on some of the things to ask for. But the one other thing that they also do is on-site visits, and that's really where we'll get to know if the person, you know, how the person checks out. I've had that as a candidate twice, and I can tell you they asked pretty in-depth questions. They gave me a list of people they wanted to meet, and it wasn't necessarily the people I would have picked. Because one or two I didn't get along with that well. But when they do that, I think they get a real honest assessment. And part of what they did there was they asked to talk to 2 or 3 of my department heads. And they picked them, I didn't. And thank God they picked some good ones. So I just want to put your mind at ease there. There are things they can do to check these people out. And that's a lot of what we're paying them for. And believe me, we have made it abundantly clear to Mr. Slavin that we cannot make a mistake on this selection. It's got to be right.
George, do you want to share just a couple other thoughts too, just about the process and timing and
Sure.
what's next? And
Okay. Well, the process is, as y'all know, the board went through an RFQ. We got 8 responses back. We had a committee with 3 of the commissioners and myself, and we went through and narrowed that down to 2. We interviewed those publicly, and you can see those on our recorded shows if you want to see that. So we went through fairly detailed interviews with both. The board picked the Slavin consultant, or Slavin management consultants out of Norcross, Georgia. The other finalist was a group called Mercer. They're also out of Atlanta, but they have an office in Raleigh as well. So they were going to do this out of their Raleigh office. They were both very, very qualified. We also had 2 or 3 other firms that could also have done a very good job for us. So these folks specialize in finding county and city officials, and primarily city and county managers. So both firms have placed an awful lot of county managers throughout the country. But just as important to us, they also have placed county managers in North Carolina. So they're familiar with the state, they're familiar with how things operate in North Carolina, have a lot of familiarity with it. So we feel very comfortable with the person we got. And I should point out, the person that we have conducting the search is Robert Slavin, and he owns the company. So as we talked about, some of these folks were sending us their B team or their C team. We've got the owner of the company actually doing the search, which is as good as it gets. And this man has been in the business about 35 years. So he's extremely well qualified, and we feel very good about the expertise we have in dealing with this. So the process itself, he'll be coming up here shortly. One of the things we're going to do first is give him the 3 input sessions we had. We taped all of them. We're taping this one. You'll get to see all of that. And then he may or may not want to do an additional input session with the community. But after we get all of that input, the next step is he and the board will sit down and they'll develop what's called a manager profile. And that's basically what we're trying to do here today, is what are we looking for? And it's gonna come down to what the board feels are the major attributes they're looking for. The level of experience, education, management style, and some of it's personality. Is it a good, what kind of fit do we need? How technically competent they are in different fields. Whether they're good at organizational development, because a lot of what you're talking about on organizational culture, that's what that is are they familiar with that? And how do you change it? So we'll be looking at all of those things, but once the board does that, then those attributes we're looking at will form a lot of the basis for the advertisements that we'll then send out. And we'll do a lot of background information on Buncombe County and Asheville. We'll do quite a bit on the organization and the services we provide, and then we'll get into what specifics are we looking for. And you do that because you want them to tailor their resume and cover letter to tell you, well, what experience do you have in all of these areas? You want them to address that up front. And so once we do that, we'll be advertising it. Mr. Slavin may have some other areas he wants to advertise it in. Typically, it would be advertised in ICMA's website. That's the International City County Management Association. So that's the professional association for county and city managers at a national level. We'll also do it at the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and we'll probably do the North Carolina League of Municipalities, because some managers have done both cities and counties, so we want to make sure if they're in a city now and they're interested in a county, they may want to do that. And I will say this, I think it does help if they've got experience, but somewhere along the line, I did make the transition from being a city manager to a county manager. So I wouldn't rule those people out. It's doable, but there is a learning curve on that. I won't deny that. But a lot of what county managers and city managers do is the same thing. But there are some differences, obviously. Cities don't typically have schools, DSS, public health, things like that. So once we get the advertisements out, there'll be a certain amount of time, I think around 8 weeks or so, for them to respond. And at that point, Mr. Slavin will go through that with his staff and whittle that down to the number of finalists which this board has indicated they'd like to get them down to. And at that point, they'll start doing some of their vetting with them. During that time, while it's advertised, they will also be making some calls and actually recruiting people that they think would be a good fit for this job. As you can imagine, if he's been in the business that long, he's got a lot of contacts. He knows quite a few managers, and he can call them and say, I think this would be a good fit for you. Would you be interested in doing it? And sometimes the best applicant is somebody who's not looking for a job. You have to go out and more or less entice them to look at it and tell them why it would be a good fit for them. So once they do that, like I said, we'll come back, they'll narrow it down, they'll do background checks on them somewhat there, they'll already know them, they'll review their experience levels and all that. And then they will bring that number of people to the board. And this is going to be very board driven. We're not asking the consultant to come in here and say, give us the top 4. We want to see around 15 to 20. And then let us take it from there, review it, narrow those down further. And then we may have to do a second cut. But then we'll probably get it down to about 5 or 6 where we'll actually bring in for interviews. And Slavin will be in the room when we interview. He will provide the questions. So once he knows what we're looking for, he'll be able to tailor those questions that way. And the other part that we may do on the interview, and again, that's up to the board, but they'll be talking to the consultant about that, and that is whether to incorporate with a traditional interview setting, also whether you want to do an assessment center. And I think most of you are familiar with those, but it's basically where you give people different scenarios and you give them so much time to prepare for it, and then they make a presentation on how they would do it, or you give them a certain amount of time you give them the background information on a particular problem, and then you say, give me no more than one-page memo that explains what you would recommend and why, just like a real-life situation. And we typically make that a pretty hard problem. So that gives you their writing skills, it gives you an insight into their thought process. Also, it's fairly stressful because you give them a time limit to get it done. So you can do those kinds of things. You can have a role-playing situation, things like that. So that's really up to the board if they want to do that, or go with a traditional interview process or a combination of that. So once we have that, once we interview the top 5 or 6, the board will want to narrow those down. Now, once we get to the top 5 or 6, he'll be doing thorough background checks on all of them at that point. And one of the things they do is site visits. And I think that's going to be very important in this, because there's where you get to see how well are they thought of in the community, how well is the community functioning, that sort of thing. And they do kind of an in-depth process on that. So with that, once we get to that point, then really, the truth is all 5 or 6 of those people could do the job. They're all going to be technically competent at that point. The question at that point then is going to be, what kind of fit do they have with this board? And how does this board feel about them? And if they're all equally, reasonably equally qualified, their backgrounds have been thoroughly checked, criminal histories, credit checks, credential checks to make sure that if they said they graduated from such and such university with such and such degree, they actually did. And we'll know whether it's a diploma mill or not. So once they go through all of that, it really comes down to what's a good fit with this board. Because it is a very close working relationship, and to be successful, it's got to be a partnership between the board and the manager.
And you're aiming for February, maybe?
We actually hope that we'll make a decision in the early December. The reason we've said February is a lot of these people are under contracts, and so they will have more than a normal 2-week time period. The contracts usually stipulate, no less than 30, sometimes 45 or 60 days. But we made it clear when we hired the consultants that they had to be done by February 28th. And done meant in the seat, not hired, but actually in the seat.
Right, thanks, George. Any questions or anybody else who wants to share any thoughts?
We still got time?
Yeah, we have time.
I'm Pat Freeman from the ID Bureau, and I guess to echo what others have said, we have in-groups and out-groups, and we're located in the jail, so I think we're pretty out. I guess Jerry and I are some of the oldest on the management team. I've been there 18 years, and Jerry's been there forever. And I was just looking around the room, I'm like, yeah, we're probably some of the oldest ones. And in those years, I've seen 2 commissioners in my office. Just come on down. Like when we first opened the jail, all the commissioners spent the night before the jail was open. And we were like the new kid on the block. But then we never, in almost 20 years, I've seen 2 commissioners. So.
You can do the permitting and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I've been down 2 or 3 times getting hits.
Yeah. But I mean, come down, do a walkthrough, spend some time with the staff.
Good morning.
It wasn't encouraged. So I'm encouraging, I'm inviting.
Well, I'll be
like we're a 24/7 operation, so we can work out a convenient time. I guess my biggest thing is trust. Michael knows.
I think all of us do.
Yep. We're victims. Victims.
All we can do is try to make it better. That's what I want to try to do.
It's going to take a man like him.
Exactly. And hopefully we get somebody.
So if you can clone George Wood, I'd say do it. He came down, I got my hour, which was 2, which was great. Within 15 minutes, he goes, you need this. I'd been begging for it for years. He spotted it. So I'd just say, go for integrity, go for trust.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
George, right now would be a good time for you to negotiate a contract.
I mean, it might be a little bit more than others, but I think we might accept it.
My wife would kill me.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Pat? Thank you for sharing that and being open with us. So that's concerning to hear that someone who's leading a department is begging for something and being told no. So it's something they need and being told no.
Okay, guys, have y'all asked for stuff? I've been told no.
And it felt like that was sort of the end of the road. There was
It was.
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
non-negotiable. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
a
are
good man,
lied to your face, not just by one person, but by several. You know,
Yeah,
we'll
well,
take that and
yeah, my would.
I'm sorry that y'all have experienced that, and that should never happen, and we should be a resource in a situation where that is happening. I know that's not been the case, but just want you to hear it from us directly, that if that is happening, this should be one other place that you could go to.
Well, I think we as a group are trying to find our voice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my most important thing in looking for a county manager, like I said, we're gonna have somebody that has the skills. I'm confident that we're gonna get some quality people. But they've got to, I hear words like buildings, I hear words like silos, I hear words like staff. And when I was with a corporation that had to build, that built a culture of trust within its organization. I mean, you were using, teams and members and, and community, and, there was ways that you weren't afraid to ask. You wasn't gonna get it all the time, but you wasn't afraid to ask. And a great leader is gonna be open to all that. Most people that are in a position of leadership that have multiple levels of people working for them, a great leader feels, is actually amazed that they're in that seat. They're actually amazed that they're not entitled to that seat. They're actually amazed that they're sitting in that seat. They get the opportunity to do this every day. They get the opportunity to work with these people and remind me what I get paid. That they're that type of person, and I hope we can find someone like that. So.
It is
I would-
staff. Okay, go ahead.
I said I wanted to echo my heartfelt apologies for the years that you have all gone through this, and it's heartbreaking and tragic. And I can't think of more words to put on it, but you're taxpayers too, and we work for you. And I agree with what Brownie said, but there's a point where there's no communication, and being afraid to talk to someone is absurd, and it just creates the environment that we've had. So my apologies.
Hey, I'm Josh O'Connor. I'm your Rec Services Director, and just trying to think through the things that, in talking to my employees, what they'd like to see. First of all, I don't envy y'all's position at all, because I feel like you have to have a crystal ball into how someone will perform without being in this context. I think the first thing is not just the amount of experience, but the type of experience. I think George and Jim and the senior management team have done a great job of getting us back on the right track. But looking at someone that's had to kind of weather a rocky road before and not had smooth sailing their entire career, because we still have some hurdles to get over. The other thing is just a tighter integration between county departments. Coming from the rec side, we're not a core service, but I'd like to see the departments that aren't core services be viewed as a more creative way to deliver those core services before they become an emergency, because I think that's one of the mentalities that we have. And then just beyond that, someone that's willing to step in and understand that the employees have been through a significant amount of change, and they're all a bit uncomfortable, and willing to take that back seat and not start mashing buttons as soon as they get in, because that's certainly the discomfort that I hear the most. But I appreciate the thoroughness which y'all are undergoing the search, and I think that's being very well heard by the employees, so thank you.
What's the discomfort you hear the most? A concern that someone will come right in and start
Shifting us.
shifting stuff right away.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes, so anybody else? Okay. All right, well,
Drew, what question did you have?
he asked about the process.
Just curious about the process.
Yeah.
Did it get answered?
Sure. Well, commissioners, thank you for caring to ask us for our opinion. I think maybe some of the feedback I have is, I guess we just appreciate hearing y'all asking us what we think. I think so often you do have these people who've been in really important roles in the county for a long time who are moving the county in the right direction and working tirelessly to make Buncombe County look good. And asking for their feedback, I think, is really important. And I think they've got some great ideas, and pulling it out of them, I think, is really important. Demanding that they come up to the stage and ask for it. I was asking my employees as well what they wanted in their next county manager. And I think most of them came up through the world of Wanda. And what does that a professional manager look like is something they didn't have answers to. And I know that's a lot of y'all's experience as well. But the fear that they lived in, they wanted to make themselves small if one ever did come over to our office. There's always this perpetual fear of what this role of the county manager was, and trying to learn how to break that down through new county managers that we've had since Wanda has been a good lesson to us in what professional management looks like. And we still have a lot of learning of what a professional manager could look like, or what we'd like to see it look like. But I haven't been around as long as Jerry, but I'm still grateful for learning what a professional manager could look like. And I think we've taken some great steps in the right direction. But to echo Josh, there's been a lot of change, and county employees are exhausted and frustrated. And they need to hear that y'all continue to care, that y'all are continue to look out for what's best for employees is really important. And I think a manager that will continue to ask about what do employees think about this, what's best for the organization as a whole, caring specifically about what employees think, I think is really important, or what department heads think is critically important, to make sure we have this structure that we can pass information up and get information to y'all is critically important. But y'all being here today and asking what we think is a great step in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. Anybody else? Jim, you have anything you want to? I feel like you just have got some words of wisdom to share with us.
Well, I guess maybe some observations just over the last time. I think having been a recipient of the divide and conquer organization, which I think that was what this organization was. It was a divide and conquer. You divide departments and you segment them, and then you play departments off of each other in order to get your own benefit. That's my opinion. And I think it will take a long time to work through that. I think if I understand, I know this is being recorded, but I'm just, you asked. I think when I'm gone, that will be a big part as well, because I represent the health and human services world that was perceived to have everything, that was perceived to have all of the bells and whistles. And so there's a certain level of distrust that comes when I immediately walked over here. If I had to do it over, if I ruled the world, and fortunately I do not, I would have loved to have stayed right over there and finished my career, because my career is done thanks to the county manager by no later than the end of December of next year. So that's a legacy that every one of these department directors feels. And when I came over into this position, what I saw was incredible disparity and incredible, what Pat said, I saw incredible levels of need. When I looked at the library and I looked at what they needed just to be staffed, not to have anything extra, but just to be staffed, I don't see how they, other than having known, my wife having worked with librarians and knowing that world, had it not been for the passion that librarians have for libraries, we wouldn't be open. We would not be open. When I look at what Parks and Recreation Services did not have just to maintain, I say Josh's inside joke, the barbecue chip tradesman. Had it not been for a tradesman like Josh to be able to trade barbecue chips to get something, our parks would not be in the condition that they're in now. I look at the planning department and I look at their budget and I see the literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that were sitting in that planning budget that were not available to be used, much less for the citizens of this county, but to supply the departments with the necessary equipment. Some people sitting in 20 and 30-year-old wooden chairs that are one step away from an ADA legitimate lawsuit. Those are the things that when I look at what and the work that George has done in helping to just lay out the realities of where we are from a fiscal perspective. We all like to talk about what great fiscal shape we're in. Well, we're not. We're going to have to face reality in terms of our fiscal condition. And that's either going to be, it's either going to be you're going to have to raise taxes or there are going to have to be reductions. That's the reality of what's going to happen, because we've lived in this fallacy world of let's budget 15 million in fund balance and then aren't we great managers because we don't spend it. And yet that's not reality. That's not reality. And it's only because the department suffered at such a level, both from a staffing and from just having the things that they need to do their work, that it will take a master manager. And I hope that both at the department level, at the commission level, and at the citizen level, that we are all patient with the new manager, because that new manager is not going to be able to fix everything. It's refreshing for George to have George here, because we're able to see a different side. But and I'm not trying to put words in George's mouth, but I think for George to do everything that he sees is not something that can be necessarily pleasant, and not necessarily going to be one that is going to be happen overnight. So I hope that you'll have. I counted just in the responsibilities that I have, 5 of the 8 departments that I represent have new directors. That's big. And you have a new budget, finance, county manager, you'll have a new assistant manager. And so you'll have, you have a great opportunity, and you also have a great challenge. And so I love this county. I think this county does incredible work. And I will say that until I have no more mind to be able to say that, because I believe it. But I do believe that as well, there are a lot of things that are going to take a long time for a manager to fix. And so my challenge to you is, please don't expect the manager or the staff to fix all of that and to think that it's going to be smooth sailing, because it won't be smooth sailing. It will take time and effort and hard work. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So, for these departments that, the chairs that were underfunded, they just didn't feel like they could go anywhere or say anything to anybody?
I can't speak for those departments about what they were, what their experiences were then. I guess just in my experience, there's not a single one that thought, oh wow, I didn't realize I could have that I need that. They all know that they need it. It's been a part of the process, and I don't know at what level, whether that was an assistant or a manager that said that. I can't answer that, but I just know that there's great disparity. And again, this is my opinion. I think that was leveraged for a reason.
I agree with that.
I agree with that too.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much.
Yeah. I need to follow Jim. Can I just
Yes.
go
Yep.
Yeah, I'm
You sure
sure
can.
hoping you would.
We can go upstairs late. We need to listen to y'all.
So I'm Jennifer Pike. I'm your tax collector. There's been a lot of discussion on culture. There's been a lot of discussion on equity, a tremendous amount of trust. And this is not just trust internally. This is trust external. And I say that because I'm getting quite a few love letters these days since I sent bills. And our citizens, and I'm a citizen, long-time citizen, they've lost trust in our government. I know you've heard it. So it's not just working on this culture, which is an enormous piece. It's working on the trust for all our citizens as well. And I see that pretty regularly. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for sharing your perspective and for being really candid and very thoughtful. We really appreciate it. You know, as I and I know other commissioners have been out in the community talking at different events, you know, we're sort of at this phase where, you know, just people want to just hear the straight facts, right? You know, everybody knows it's not a pretty situation. So, but it really is, this is a great opportunity for the county to we're going to transition into something different, and we can really come out of this really strong. And one of the things that George has really emphasized in the time that he's been here and meeting with a lot of folks is that we do have great people. I mean, it sounds like a cliche to say that we have great people, but it's really, really true. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being with us today. I think I probably have, I don't know, as much to take away from this conversation as just about any that I've had since I've been on the county commission. So thank you very much for.
Thank you.
All right, we're adjourned.
Thanks, guys.